I'm so glad to see so many young people in the audience because this panel is pretty much directed at you. So the title is The Revival of Local Civil Societies and Imperatives of Cross-Border Cooperation, a New Global Generation for Peace. I just wanted to frame this before we start with the speakers, and I wanted to kind of emphasize that, you know, we cannot take the easy path to the future. We're going to have to make, you know, personal and professional commitments. And we have to keep doing something to be ready for the moment when the right combination of events align and we can see a better future. Right now, there's a lot of chaos and disinformation and uncertainty. So we're used to a mode where we act and then we say, maybe what we're doing is not working. I think you're going to hear examples today of what is working. And we have to stop second guessing each other. We just have to keep on going and working every day, doing what we do. So history teaches us that you don't know, you never know when you are about to win. Even the day before you win, you don't know you're about to win. But then sometimes, someday, you win. But you can only win if you keep at it every day and you recognize that the future is open. We are not in a closed system, and you see and feel that things are changing very rapidly from day to day. Now, the other side will make you feel like it is inevitable that they will win and that there is only one future and it's their future. And this is not what history shows us to be true. Everything is unpredictable. And what actually happens is not going to be what they think is going to happen. It's much more fluid and wide open than we understand and can even see. And that is the ultimate historical lesson, that the horizon of possibilities is much broader than we see. And because it's broader than we see, we cannot take the easy path of being depressed or despairing or giving up. We have to keep doing what we do until the moment, the tipping point, when the conjuncture of our actions opens up, and then we can see the opening to something better. So don't give up. And now we're going to have a wonderful panel with, you know, young people who have not given up. Our first speaker today is Blerta Tuci from the EU Policy Hub Albania. She also belongs to our family here because Blerta finished her MA here in Kőszeg under my program. It was with Corvinus University of Budapest, yeah, that I directed. So Blerta is part of the family, and I'm so glad that we could have her back. Blerta.
Thank you, Jody, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here again after 10 years, and for me it's a bit emotional. So if you see me with emotions, please don't judge me, because, you know, it's a wonderful opportunity, I think, for all of us, and for you especially as young people. It's great also to see the amazing changes that had happened here, and I'm really happy for you, Jody, and for Ferenc, that you have realized your dreams. You made it this institution bigger and bigger, and with more scholars and academics that are coming here. I'm going to speak about civil society. It's not easy after lunch to speak about civil society. And it's not easy to speak about the civil society in Western Balkans. Countries with the mindset that working voluntarily, which many of us did and do, is like wasted time. So, but it's not. You learn a lot by being part of civil society organizations and other grassroots movements. You learn a lot, and you benefit for yourself and inspire others to do so. Civil society in Albania and other countries in the Western Balkans is facing different challenges, I would say, And also the countries are facing a prolonged accession process, which is considered somehow from different assessment or studies that also democratic backsliding is happening across the region. So this is not a good thing, and it's not the best landscape for the development of civil society and civil society organizations. Of course, EU requires strong civic participation, and the constraints towards civic actors has been increasing. My question here would be that civil society is existing in these countries, but we don't know if these actors possess the transformative capacity in their society. Maybe my colleagues here from other countries will say more about the movements and what is going on also in this aspect in Western Balkans. But we have to widen this. We have to widen this civic cell, and we must benefit a different response to these actors. For them to perform not only the democratic function that they have, which is accountability, advocacy, oversight, but also to help citizens to mobilize around governance failure, generate public pressure, and influence policy outcome. In my, what I have noticed around, but also from studies coming from Freedom House, for example, we see different patterns, which are politicization of institutions, weak judicial independence, and media capture. And this creates structural asymmetry with political elites, so make it very difficult for civil society organizations to survive and to have a real impact. Where I'm going, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. So the civic space is shrinking. And what should we do about widening the civic space? We must say that we have space about being part of the consulting, being part of the roundtables, being part of discussions with importance, but we are not necessarily heard. This does not mean that we are necessarily heard. We face different legal harassment, administrative burdens, and delegitimization. Sometimes the campaigns are delegitimized, and limited access, real access to policy making, which means a real feedback and incorporation of our feedback. I don't know what is going here. Oh, okay. But we have also internal vulnerabilities, which are heavy reliance on short-term donor funding, project-based logic over long-term strategy. CSOs very often are being professionalized, so they are staying in their corner and working, but are detached from grassroots base, which I would say the community in this case, and urban concentration of CSO. We must work differently in technical perspective and also how we approach our communities. And as for the enabling environment of CSOs, the monitoring matrix from Balkan Network Civil Society Organization has shown that in Western Balkan countries, the enabling environment is sometimes fully enabling, sometimes partially enabling, and we can see the dots with the yellow dots which say partially enabling, which is Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia, and there are other countries like Montenegro, Kosovo, and Albania, which are enabling, but I doubt that we are so enabling environment. We have evidence of movements and the resilience toward different aspects going on with civil society, which I would mention environmental protests in Serbia in 2022, student protests in Albania in 2018, Justice for David movement in Bosnia, and student mobilization for anti-corruption protests, which happened recently in Serbia, which led to a student protest triggered by a tragic public infrastructure incident, and the colorful revolution in North Macedonia. From my experience and what I see around is that civil society is eroding. The reasons are many. I would say one of the biggest reasons, for example, for countries like Albania, but I don't know about Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and North Macedonia. The USAID-driven donors projects has been. Okay, well, it's okay. Has been stopped, and that caused that many projects has been stopped overnight. Many services for communities has stopped overnight, and many people remained without job. For the moment, the main donor for all Western Balkan countries, I think it's European Union. And to change and to shift this landscape, it's important for governments, for our governments, to protect the civic space legally and politically, ensure transparency related to incorporation of the feedback coming from civil society organization. EU should strengthen conditionality related to civic participation and protect civic actor from being retaliated by internal political actors, and for donors, which is I think the most important, to shift their perspective towards long-term support and mostly invest in grassroots and local civic mobilization. That is more or less what I wanted to say, because I know my colleagues here would go deeper into the movements and what is happening in the grassroots level. So I will leave, I'm open for questions, and I will leave the floor to Igor or Ivana. Or which?
I want to introduce. Thank you so much. I think maybe in the discussion, in the discussion, we can ask Blerta how she formed her own organization and how they survive. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Now I'm very happy to introduce a new member of our family here, because Rodoljub Jovanović from the Institute of Philosophy and Social Theory at the University of Belgrade. It's his first time here, but as I always say, if we can get you here once, we can get you to return. So get used to the trip from Belgrade. It's not that far. So please, it's.
Great. I'm going to stay here so I can see the screen as well as you guys. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I can see why people keep coming back. It's a beautiful place. And I heard a lot about it ever since I did Mires, my master's in Bologna. Yeah, so I was, it's an extended family, I guess. Okay, so thank you for the nice introduction. And thank you, Blerta, for making this introduction. I think that is going to help all of us really place our stories within this framework, that we don't have to go through some of these things at the beginning. So what I want to talk about today is a major part of my research, which is youth in post-conflict societies, education, and basically youth in Serbia and the wars of the 90s, or you could say memories of the wars of the 90s. However, going back to the start, at the beginning, and a theme of our panel today, as you probably all know, in Serbia for the last year and a half, we have these major protests that gather huge crowds. If you haven't, check out this webpage where you can find all the photos made by students, and you can use them with for free for your presentations. So the collapse of the canopy at the Novi Sad train station, and the corruption of the government sort of spring all of these events into existence. There are many different occasions since last winter, and this is a movement led by youth, by students, of course joined by other citizens, that also became unfortunately violent in many different occasions, and as you can see here, for example, and currently it's very difficult yet to say where we are, but soon hopefully we'll have the election and know more. What my question is, and was even before these protests started, is we have this movement led by youth, but who are these young people? And you in the audience are very young as well, but if you think about that, it's 2026, people who are 18-year-old now in Serbia were born when Kosovo proclaimed independence in 2008. And people who are 26 were born when the wars in Croatia and Bosnia ended. So let that sink in. So youth between 18 and 30 years old in Serbia now basically has very little connection, let's say, or definitely no personal experience with the wars in the 90s. And this keeps changing, of course. Every year we have a new generation of youth who is perceiving these things from their own perspective. What was interesting for me is who are these young people today, what they know about the wars, and how is this past weighing on them, and consequentially also on these protests or movements or actions that they are conducting throughout this year and a half. So, going back to that, when we talk about youth and collective memory of violent conflict, there's always many different sources of memory, let's say, even though we know it's co-constructed between those who remember and the sources, we often frame it as different sources of memory. So family, social media, arts, murals, peers, many different things. However, education is one of the, maybe not most important, but I'll get to that. I disagree with a lot of other colleagues in this respect. I think it's still super important, partly because it still holds epistemic authority. It has 100% reach. Everyone goes to school, at least the elementary school or whatever it's called, elementary middle school combination is mandatory in most of the countries, and for better or worse, it is controlled by the state. We'll get to that. However, you see here this image where between which different sources this memory is constructed. When we talk about education, of course, the most important thing is history education, the official place and space where young people are taught about the past of the society. And of course, while many scholars would say that this actually is more telling of what the current government wants them to know and not about what the past actually is, I think the consequences are the same. For these young people, this is they go to, I don't know, 8th grade of elementary school once, and this is what they learn about that past. So the usual questions that we ask when we talk about history education is, does history education even talk about these violent conflicts, or is this something that is skipped because it's uncomfortable or difficult topic or sensitive topic? And if yes, in which way do they talk about it? So in Eastern Europe, in Serbia, when we talk about educational media, what types of education, what do these young people come into contact with in terms of media? Unfortunately, it's still mostly textbooks, very traditional type of history teaching. And when it comes to teachers, who are the actors of this process, or the main, one of the main actors is teacher didactics, initial teacher training, which is a fancy way to say university studies for history teachers, educational system as a whole that is also very important for this. Direct focus on youth is fairly rare. Not to say there is no one dealing with this, but it is quite rare. So what I ask is, do young people know anything about this? Because oftentimes you hear people talking about youth in a very diminishing way, like, these young people, they don't know anything, they're just looking at their phones, they don't care about this. So it's important to ask if they know anything. If yes, what is it they know? What is the quality of this? And what kind of attitudes and beliefs about the violent conflict, in-group, out-group, all of these different actors in these conflicts, which are in their own right very complex stories of different violent interactions between various groups, and it's not an easy thing to understand always. Okay. So first, we're going to go into history education a little bit. When we talk about history teachers, I'm conducting a study at the moment, and we already have some preliminary results. Most of the teachers complain about the lack of different resources. Lack of time is one of them. A lot of demands from the ministry, top down, and not enough time to do all of it. And it would be easy to guess that the first topics being sort of skipped are the difficult ones, especially the wars in the 90s. Textbooks are the main tool, but teachers find them not good quality and not really providing enough, not only in terms of information, but how modern the didactic approach of the textbooks is. If you think of textbooks, usually, at least in my generation, you think of these boring books. They're here and there some photos, but just mostly the text that you need to remember. Lack of initial teacher training. Teachers, young people studying history currently wanting to become history teachers, if there are any left who really want it. But in Belgrade, for example, it is you go to study history, and then you decide at the end if you want to be a historian or maybe become a teacher or something else. They do not discuss this particular time period as much, or I could say almost not at all. This is changing slowly, but very, very slowly. So they do not get any kind of specific training in how to talk to students about difficult topics, how to deal with this. They know this time from their personal experience, basically, which they use a lot to fill this gap, which is a double-edged sword, as you can imagine, because, someone had a very harsh personal experience during this time. Someone drew a lesson that maybe, violence is not an answer. Someone maybe drew a completely opposite lesson, but we don't know, because we cannot control that. Most of the trainings dealing with this that they can get in service, during their time teaching, are led by NGOs, and they're project-based, which often means that they start, they go for a year, then they completely disappear, and then the cycle continues. Finally, there is a constant struggle with the narratives outside of the classroom, and most of the teachers I interviewed, they talk about also these new crises now opening up these questions of the past in the Balkans, so Russian invasion in Ukraine, the genocide in Gaza, they all open up these questions, and students keep asking or bringing what teachers say, like these dangerous narratives to the classroom. Luckily, they at least bring it there. In addition to this, what we know from previous studies is that history education rarely covers these topics, that teaching methods across Western Balkans are fairly traditional, and the textbooks, what is in the textbooks, and I said they're pretty important, distort the past. So there is a selective presentation and emphasis on in-group victims and out-group perpetrators. So oftentimes in Serbia, they completely skip instances of violence committed by the in-group, so by this ethnic group that we belong to, whichever it is, and then they emphasize instances where members of our in-group were victims. We find also, and I'm not going to go into detail into this, but you can find it in some of the papers I wrote or some other places. There is narrative normalization of violence and sort of dissemination of ethos of conflict beliefs, which all lead to this distorted image of the past, which what is important for us here is they're not helping harmonize these relationships between these ethnic groups. Okay, so there's some data from 2023. This was actually a representative sample of youth in Serbia, and if we asked them how much did you deal with the 90s wars in school, or this is like not at all on the far left and very much on the far right. So not at all or very little, almost 75% of young people say that they didn't actually deal with this at all. Only 1/4 says some or somewhat. Okay, so what can we conclude from the side of the youth or these young people is they know very little. So this data coming from the same study, when we ask them how much do you know about the 90s, we see very similar spread like in the previous one. So not at all, almost 20%, and very little, almost 50%. And this is interesting because this is when you ask someone how much do you know about something, people usually tend to overestimate their knowledge. So if we actually gave them some kind of a test on historical facts about this period, this would probably be even worse. So this is what they admit to not knowing. In addition to this, as I mentioned before, normalization of violence and supporting these conflict supporting narratives or holding these beliefs, there is the formation of attitudes that hinder harmonization, and we see the ethos of conflict. Some of these beliefs are the legitimization of the other groups, so they see other groups as throughout these events as more immoral, more cruel, sometimes labeled as terrorists, emphasis on the violence against the in-group, so these events are sort of zoomed into, and interesting part of this is that our goals, whatever they were justified. And when it comes to narrative frame, which is this justification of violence or normalization, is that young people, in this study we found that they uncritically employ nationalism to explain recent violent past, which could indicate accepting it as a mode of conduct for the future political thinking as well. So they explain things by okay, there was this outburst of nationalism, and of course this led to wars, as if when there is nationalism, there has to be war, and then they don't, or there has to be violence. They don't question really these connections. In addition to this, some of their ideas about this period and some of their, as you at the beginning I mentioned these sources, and I mean as again this is of course co-constructed in this complex interaction between the person and the environment. However, if you look at them as sources and as students, Where do you find out about these topics? Of course, very little in all of these, so these differences are very, very small, but this is the order. And even though conversations with parents and close family members are the first place, I would say it's very optimistic that school is still in the strong second place, thinking about where they find information about this. You remember at the beginning when I said education is regulated by the state, for better or worse. We often in these rooms talk about education being regulated by the state as something that we cannot change, but I say, where is the protest, for better history textbooks? Where is the protest for better education? I mean, some of them are, but oftentimes we think of it as something that we cannot change. And I would suggest that, civil society organizations should also engage with the state and try to push for better better school lessons on all of this. And I mean, the other sources are, of course, there, as you can imagine. A lot of them, of course, find out these things in other places. But as I say, I think this is optimistic that school is high on this ranking board. And finally, what I know, and which is sort of becoming more and more focus of my interest, is what they know. This very, very little they know is very selective and biased. And we see that if we ask them a little bit more about these things, and now this is going to require some knowledge of what happened during the 90s, but I'll help you. So if we ask them, according to you, what is the most important event related to the 90s wars, youth in Serbia, first of all, you see that 28% says, I have no idea. So this means that they cannot name even one. If you know one, you're going to say, this is the most important because I know only one. So 30% does not know anything about it, which is also a complex thing that I'm not going to go into, whether this means that they really don't know, or there is our colleague Igor Stipić wrote a very, very interesting paper about this don't know answers in surveys that I suggest you read. But what is interesting, for most of them, the most important events are ones where members of their ethnic groups were victims. So Operation Storm is the first one. I guess the biggest event where ethnic Serbs were victims. NATO bombing, which of course you probably know about it, and then you have this generic killing of civilians, the breakup of Yugoslavia. These events that are not even like events if we strictly speak about it. So you see that there is a lot of bias there. According to you, what is the biggest crime committed? We see again the very, very similar pattern. So 20% says they don't know, and 20% says the Operation and Storm and Flash were the biggest crimes. Again, where mainly ethnic Serbs were victims, NATO bombing, and then again we have this killing of civilians of any nationality as the event, even though it's strictly said what is the biggest crime, so like singular crime. So unfortunately, as I say, they know very little, but this what they do know is biased and selective. And finally, when you ask them what is the attitude towards the following actors, you see that no matter how many years in jail they got, what crimes they were convicted or accused of, you see that all of these that are not part of our ethnic group or the ethnic group of the participants are judged much more negatively. So Croatian general and Ante Gotovina, Alija Izetbegović, Franjo Tuđman, all of these were judged much more negatively. So to conclude. And this is just a small part of the data that we got. To conclude my questions that I'm leaving you with, because it's very difficult to give any kind of a good prediction, especially that we are in the middle of this process in Serbia in terms of the protests, is how will these new generations confront difficult past? Is this I wouldn't say they can get away with not doing it, but we can talk about how exactly are they going to do it. should we expect them to solve this complex puzzle that for 30 or 25 years now is not being solved by the rest of us or the older generations? And what lessons, if we manage to somehow also look at the bigger picture, and we talked here yesterday and today and the day before about all of these things happening in the world today, what are the lessons for the new post-conflict societies that unfortunately we're going to have many of in the following. Hopefully they're going to become post-conflict very soon. And I think we can learn a lot from the Yugoslav case for this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rodoljub. I think we have it's really an enormous topic, and I really want you all to weigh in when we have the discussion. I just think it's really interesting that we have kind of a re-emergence of past trauma in response to the current conflicts. You know, I mean, even if they don't confront this directly with their families or, you know, it's internalized. It's psychologically internalized, and then it comes out in many different forms. So now I have the pleasure to introduce to you my right hand here at iASK and with my Balkan Research Group, Ivana Stepanović, who is a research fellow here and a permanent fellow. So, Ivana.
Thank you. I would like to talk about protests in general first, and then talk about some symbolism, how they are exchanged in social media, and how I call this copy-paste resist or copy-paste transnational activism or just activism, copy-paste activism and resistance. I'm going to talk about some of the conclusions from my research, which is ongoing for more than 10 years now, about social media, the importance of analyzing semiotics of social media, what is happening in the exchange of narratives on social media. But also I'm going to focus on the case of Serbia and the protests in Serbia. So let's start with Pikachu. So Pikachu is important for me because it is a very social media phenomenon. It is a figure which when you look at it, you are confused. Why is this even in the context of protest? But it's a very powerful message, because first of all, it is something that symbolizes. It is a character which symbolizes non-violence, friendliness, something very cute, something that is almost mocking the brutal police force. And so it's not a coincidence that Pikachu is appeared as such a powerful symbol, and it appeared in different countries and very different cultural backgrounds. So in Turkey, in Serbia, in US, and probably in some other countries as well. But these are the three cases that I know for sure. And so what is happening also that a lot of these videos and photos of Pikachu were also AI generated and then circulated around social media. It has this viral quality. It is very shareable. It is very attractive to look at, and people are just, it's very engageable, speaking in social media terms. And so this inflatable costume of Pikachu has this practical role where it is protecting the protesters' privacy. So we don't really know who is behind it, and if Pikachu is so fast that he is running from the police, maybe the police will never be able to identify this person. But it is also there exactly to produce a certain narrative. So we have a good citizen against evil policeman. So this is a very powerful symbolism. And just because I wanna make you all keep thinking about these inflatable costumes, and I don't even know how many of you have even seen this, because it was not so easy to find this on the internet. You had to really follow the US protests. on social media in order to see those, because this is not something that will just show up on CNN randomly. And it is not something that would show up in your feed even. And I showed it to many people who were following the protests, and they were like, oh, even I haven't seen this. So this is a phenomenon in Oregon, Portland, Oregon. And so they have this symbol of frog. And very similarly, we have a double function of these costumes, that they are hiding the privacy of the protesters, but they are also really showing the absurdity of police brutally attacking protesters who are peaceful, who are just protesting against something that they think it's terror and excessive use of force over the civilians. And so I also think that they were picked not just because they are standing the symbolism of mocking the brute force and the power of police, and especially of this, I don't know how to call it, the ICE, maybe paramilitary, I don't know how to call it. And so, but also because of this algorithmic, of this engageability or shareability, this quality that this kind of content, because it is so visually appealing, might be able to attract a lot of attention on social media, and perhaps this is also one of the reasons. And what is coming from my research, some of the general, let's say, conclusions of my research of social media, which is lasting for years now, is that the social media create this new type of understanding of community, and maybe changing how we perceive what community even is. And in this community, it is the sharing, reposting, and borrowing and copy-pasting somebody else's content is very common. And this is how you understand maybe community in a very broad sense, in a broader sense, where we are all one community trying to save the world, for example, I don't know, from climate change. Or we are all one big TikTok community where billions of users. So this is very different how in social media you can perceive community. It can be very, very broad, it can be slightly smaller, it can be very tiny, a group of your friends, but something is changing in a very concept and notion of community. And without going too much into the philosophy of this, I just wanted to show. And now I'm gonna just share the strategies, some of the key strategies of the Serbian protest, just to show how they are how these strategies are precisely what is also being shared across social media. So there is one of the features is, of course, university blockades, plenary decision making, which is this form of direct democracy that Serbian students introduced. Cross-country marches, tactical use of humor, hybrid of online-offline mobilization, peaceful protests, no violence, emotional framing, youth versus power. This is what I was talking about. Youth is good. They are so, how to say it, you can emotionally relate to the young kids, students. But on the other side, you have a very evil police, brutal, excessive use of force, etc. So and then something very specific, I think, this patriotism without nationalism, and the non-ethnic alignments. And actually, if I want to have a dialogue with Rodoljub, I would ask him if you know anything about whether these kids are, even though they don't know a lot or maybe almost nothing, what would they think about nationalism? So that's also for me, that was very that's very curious, and we still, I don't know anything about it, but I have a hunch, and I will tell you why, that they actually don't like nationalism, and they see. So, but I'm curious to find out that if the facts, from the ground are proving this. And so these strategies are shared across. So it is not new that in the times of social media, the resistance movements, the social media, the resistance movements are sharing the tactics, the strategies. So this is a very old phenomenon, and of course that it happened before social media. But I wanted to say that it's this sharing of these strategies is amplified because of the shareability, of course. And now my favorite part of these protests that I want to explain to you a little bit, to give you this example. There's so much to do with the topic of our conference that we have this wonderful example of diplomacy and peace building from below. And I'm sorry that Katalin Bodjo is not here. I was hoping that she will. Doesn't matter. I just wanted to say that this tour, the Strasbourg, wasn't shared at all or reported on in the traditional media, or almost at all. Like, it was very, very hard to find information about this tour, the Strasbourg, in the media, even in Serbian media, obviously only in the opposition media. And how we were all following the news about this, mostly through social media. And I know that a lot of Europeans, even though this was happening in many different countries in Europe, and you can see the map here, they also didn't have any information about this in their media. So some of them who were enthusiastic about it, knew about the protest, knew about the tour, they were following it on social media. So what I wanted to emphasize here is that we have this very interesting case of performative youth diplomacy. And they kind of gained their moral legitimacy through their sacrifice, or through their determination. They cycled, just let me check how many kilometers. So they cycled 1,400 kilometers from Novi Sad to Strasbourg non-stop. So they only would spend one night in each city on their route. And this was a very unique act of performance, and it bypasses the state. So we have students who were chosen basically through the criteria who can cycle the best and who has the best bicycle. And they directly addressed European institutions. And what they went there to ask for, justice. So they went out because they faced brutal force by the police and by the institutions of the state, and they felt that they are attacked by the state, and that there is no justice. So they cycled to Strasbourg specifically to address the institutions that were based there, and then they were also running. They also had a running tour to Brussels. But this is also amplified by these arrival ceremonies and diaspora mobilization. But all of these events were very much shared on social media, and we have this transnational storytelling also, that we had also support from various parts of former Yugoslavia who kind of supported them, but also people along the way. And just wanted to emphasize this is a very interesting example of this new form of youth diplomacy, and just to then show some of the hotspots of these Gen Z protests, which are often framed around anti-corruption and fight for justice, and how they have these shared strategies, how we keep seeing very similar patterns, very similar social media campaigns, very similar content, very similar strategies. They have marches, and then these information were exchanged digitally, and so we have a very significant role of social media, especially in the countries where the traditional media are captured. So it's interesting how very similar narratives and similar strategies and even similar protest slogans, and you see similar images, similar visual images are in very different cultural contexts across the global north, south, east, west. But also the oppression strategies are also copy-paste. So we have paramilitary hybrid security units, we have masked or anonymized security forces wearing masks so that they cannot be recognized. Then police brutality, disproportionate use of force, criminalization of protests on also sometimes similar basis, media delegitimization also of protests, using nationalism as a sort of alibi for ethnically non-aligned violence. And then we have also bought farms and this kind of informal policing on social media, and spin and what I call simulation tactics, but it's basically spin politics. So we have these images, and we are not even sure which one is from where. For example, okay, the one down is of course from Serbia. It's a famous place called Chatsiland. If anybody doesn't know and is interested, I'm happy to explain afterwards. And then this other photo, I'm not even sure if it's from Georgia or Serbia, because it looks very, very identical. Like, I don't even know. Okay, probably not from Serbia, because it would be differently written on the plastic covers. And so now I wanted to leave you with something a bit shocking. Why Taylor Swift and Greta? Well, because this transnational fandom of Taylor Swift has a really, I think, powerful potential to share certain values. And so what is happening with activism on social media? Basically, I want to talk about that digitally it is thanks to the social media, but also these digital communication platforms, it is very easy to trace and to create these really large groups of fandom is changing activism. Basically, fandom is transforming activism, and I basically just wanted to highlight Taylor Swift because she probably has the biggest group of fans in the world, and they are really impacting how young people are understanding, what is ethical and how. Even the political choices, etc. But also, I highlighted Greta Thunberg because, for example, Global Sumud Flotilla is one of these examples of the transnational global action, humanitarian action against war or for peace, or to just bring, some humanitarian aid to the conflict zone. And I don't know if is it too long now? I still have a few minutes. I just have to wrap up. What my message would really be is about the importance of researching social media, but in depth, because we can all scrape the data, analyze the data. We can all pick up certain elements of it, but what I find really useful is to really dig deep and dive in. Into this ethnographic approach. The ethnographic approach means that, first of all, you have long-term observation and not just some quick observation, but rather you spend some time in the field, and also you can so you have obviously the methods of digital ethnography, such as online observation instead of observation, and interviews, etc. And I wanted just to highlight some of the theoretical work that I was using in my research, if this could be useful to these of you who are interested in this type of research. And yes, this is what I wanted to emphasize, that only long-term analysis of social media can really help us understand how activism works today, because it is happening online to a great extent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So many interesting images and research topics there. I'm really aging myself again, as usual, but some of these tactics that I saw used in Belgrade, I observed in New York for the Occupy Wall Street. Way back when. Everybody said that Occupy Wall Street was a failure, but these movements, they kind of submerge and then re-emerge when the need arises, and so some of the tactics are shared, over time. But I think something really impressive and fascinating now is this transnational sharing of best practices of resistance. I've been following, I don't know how many of you, the Walk for Peace by the Buddhist monks across the United States. almost 2,000 kilometers that they walked, and with the global following, it was just millions of people. And you won't see any of this on the mainstream media, but it was really impactful. Okay, now we move to Igor Stipić, who we identify here always as an iASK fellow, because you were here for, how long were you here? For
5 years.
5 years as a research fellow, and we will never let him go. So we're very, we're very happy that Igor is with us today from Mostar.
So first of all, thank you so much, Jody, for inviting me. I'm delighted to be in Kuseg once again after 2 years, I think now. I guess firstly I would like to, I guess the main question for Ivana is how many hours per day does she spend on social media? What does ethnographic engagement actually means in numbers? The second thing also for you, yeah, I have seen Pikachu in Chile as well during protests. So yeah, he's, I guess, pretty global figure and part of my childhood as well, of course. Yeah. So, I'm social anthropologist by training, and my area of expertise is educational and political anthropology. So basically I'm interested in the youth studies, but I like to study politics through studying youth. During the last 4 years, I have spent 3 years working in high schools. 2 of these years I spent working as an anthropologist, and I did ethnographies in 2 particular high schools. One in Bosnia and another one in Chile, where I did my PhD fieldwork at a public and very politicized high school in Santiago de Chile. And I returned to Bosnia and Herzegovina, where I work as a teacher in another high school for a year. So I'm connected to youth in this sense, and it's very part of my deep interest. And previously I worked on social movements before discovering that youth and education is somehow my passion, but I think this has a lot to do with my personal history as well. So today my presentation has this topic. In the case that I don't deliver an answer, which I don't think I will, Ivana is again to blame, because she is the one who suggested me to focus on this topic. It's a joke. I'm just defending myself in advance. So I'm going to talk about the relationship between peace and education by focusing on the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is a country that I come from and that I have done a lot of research, but from which I have my own personal experience with education as well.
Keep the microphone up.
Okay, I will. Thank you, Jody. I haven't used the microphone, even though when I saw it today, I thought it would be really interesting to have it in a high school classroom. I don't know, just to confuse the student, because you have to keep people animated all the time. All the time, you have to keep engaging the people, and that's why I guess I'm always standing. Also, I don't know. Maybe it's another issue, but okay. So I'm going to start by speaking about something which didn't happen at the time when me and Ivana agreed to do this presentation. So on the 12th of February, I don't know how, 2 weeks ago, I guess exactly 2 weeks ago, there was a very, very unfortunate and tragic incident that happened in the city of Sarajevo, and that spurred the largest youth protest in the country of the last 30 years. So these are not the largest protests that we had in our 30-year-old independent history, but they are predominantly youth-led and mostly led by youth, high school students. So 70% of the people who participate in the protest are basically high school students. Maybe they got inspired by our friends in Serbia, maybe not. I still don't know because it's too early. So what happened in the city? Basically what happened is that one of the trams basically fell out of the rails and murdered tragically one university student and injured tragically one high school student, which had her leg amputated, basically. What is the problem? The problem was that the company that was doing the servicing of the trams didn't do a good job, because on the public tender, which was issued by the government of the canton of Sarajevo, there was not strict requirement on this regulation of the specific brakes, because the company needed to have this basically condition, because the trams, they have been produced in the Czechoslovakia, and they are extensively used in the city of Prague. So it's not a problem in the city of Prague if you have good servicing. The problem is that in the countries where there's a lot of corruption, as we have learned from Blerta's presentation, unfortunately these things go basically unnoticed, and there is no checks. So up to this day, we had 7 protests happening in the city of Sarajevo, and they are this anti-systemic protest. This means that they are against everything and nothing at the same time. It's just a bunch of, we can say, pissed people who come and want to protest against the system itself, which is really not directed at anyone specific, and it's directed against everyone. The demand that emerges, as we have heard also from the previous presentation, is justice. So people demand justice, people demand accountability, which, I mean, from a citizen perspective, is something normal to ask for. But again, in certain countries and in certain societies, especially in Southeast Europe, this gets to be a huge problem. So one of the students, and this is a typo here, it's Morankic, not Mrkonjic, so I really feel sorry about this. So we have a student of the University of Fine Arts who gets murdered in an accident, really, really unfortunate event, and another one, Ela Jovanović, which is a high school student at the Catholic School Center in Sarajevo, is still in the hospital, and she is still in life-threatening situation. She is still not fine. She hasn't been recovered. But that's why we have people basically from high schools gathering around and basically leading these protests for the first time. There are a bunch of other protests that are precedent to this, and I'm going to mention them a bit in advance. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about the context itself. So I'm interested in my research about this relationship between state, society, and education. So basically, Rodoljub said a little bit about this importance of the state in terms of education, in terms of the outreach that the state has towards the population and towards the socialization of young people into their identities, into understanding of their societies, and then into the practices of peace or protest and so on. So the educational system in Bosnia and Herzegovina, for those of you who do not know, it's basically divided upon ethnic lines. So what we have is we have 3 educational systems, and each ethnic group, being this Bosniak, Croat, and Serb, have their own educational systems, which basically teach nationalist narratives and basically promote something that would be antithesis to peace, unfortunately. So they promote conflict, they do not promote reconciliation. That's why seen from this context, these protests that are happening at the moment are so interesting, because they are asking something that's not based on ethnicity, but it's based on some kind of good that would be equal to all citizens of all kind of ethnic groups, and that's why they are somehow interesting in this sense. So my own personal history is related to this. So, for example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, during the Cold War, during this war of the 90s that you spoke about, it was basically, unfortunately, and I'm laughing about it because what can you do? I mean, honestly, you can laugh, and this is the only thing that can keep you sane somehow. So this is the Bosnia and Herzegovina, and only these 2 parts, 6 and 7, are the parts of the country that remain somehow multi-ethnic in the aftermath of the war. These are 2 cantons. One is Central Bosnian Canton, and another one is Herzegovina-Neretva Canton. So here you have huge populations of Bosniaks and Croats. Serbs were expelled during the war, but now we have this multi-ethnic situation, but we have segregated educational systems. So we have a question of what we do with education in these kind of still multi-ethnic cities. So the intervention of international community at the time was to create this system that's known as 2 schools under 1 roof. So basically, if this was a building of of a high school in the town of Kusek, and Kusek had Germans and Hungarians. You would have Hungarians studying in this floor and then Germans studying below, right? So Hungarians would have their own curriculum and Germans would have their own curriculum. Everybody would learn their own history, and these histories would actually promote conflict and not cooperation between the people who are living in the same building or in the same town as Kusek, or in this case, Mostar. So this is two schools under one roof, the famous Gimnazia or Gymnasium of Mostar that I attended between 2004 and 2006. And this is the place that unfortunately teaches these divided historical narratives. One is just an example of the school in the central Bosnian canton in the town of Travnik, and you can see very visually how the school is divided between different ethnic groups, and the relationship towards the peace is pretty problematic. In here I want to mention this Bosnian social unrest from 2014 because it's very, very important for understanding the context inside of which we function. It is the most significant anti-systemic protest that happened in the last 30 years. Many government buildings were burned down. It was the first and the most significant anti-ethnic protest in the country as a whole. And it was also the first time that I arrived to Kusek here, and I met Blerta during this year, and I didn't see her for 12 years until today. So a very, very emotional year for me. Today I guess I'm less emotional, and when we speak about these topics, I think it's important because it helps you remain somehow sane. Today I'm doing actually another research on the student movement in Montenegro, but this is a completely different story, but just to tell you where I actually come from towards this topic. So one case that I want to shortly focus on is the Jajce Technical High School. So Jajce Technical High School is located here. As you can see, it's located inside of the part of the country that it's still somehow multi-ethnic. In 2016, 2 years after the most important social uprising that we had, we have the most significant high school uprising where students of this Jajce Technical High School decide that they want to study together. We have Bosniak and Croat students who are from 14 to 18 years of age forming their own movement and saying we don't want to be divided along ethnic lines, we want to study together, and we don't want to separate from our friends. For people coming from the United States, this may seem like whatever, it can happen on any day, but for the context of Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's very important to understand, especially when this desire for change comes from the youth itself. From the youth who actually have different understanding, and understanding that's produced through everyday sociality. So the demands of this movement that you can see here, obviously because it's the context of Balkan, post-Yugoslavia, all the flags have to be together. They demanded several things together with their teachers that formed an organization that was called Better School. They wanted unified curriculum that would be conducted in Bosnian, Croatian, and Serbian that would be recognized as similar enough so we can study together. They wanted multinational board of the school, and they wanted the most contentious issue, the formation of common Bosnian and Herzegovinian textbook. So you can understand this would be very, very tricky and important for the people in power because it would imply that we teach shared histories, which of course is not welcomed by the regime in power. At the time, the Minister of Education, who was Katica Čerkez, declared that the system of two schools under one roof is good because it prevents pears and apples from mixing. Basically, it prevents people from somehow integrating with each other and just keeps this kind of separate identities. During 2022, during 2016, I went there to this high school as an iASK researcher, and during 2022, I went there as an ethnographer for 6 months. I stayed at this high school because I wanted to understand the underlying reasons why this could happen in our society and what was the meaning of this. Because of the scope of time, what I can say that in 2022, 6 years after the protest, the good thing was that the school remained together. The bad thing is that the government still implemented a national group of subjects. So the kids stayed in the same high school, but they learned different history, different geography, different language, and different arts. So this was a partial victory. I think in general, the government just waited for the years to pass so they can just continue doing what they want to do from the very beginning. Another problem that I found at the school was intentional forgetting. So the leadership of the school has changed. The director was replaced. The new one was politically positioned from the same party as the Minister of Education. And what I saw and what was very interesting for me, that many of the teachers who taught in 2016 did what? What do people do in the Western Balkans? They emigrated to the EU. Many of the teachers who led the protests emigrated to the EU. Some of them didn't even work as teachers. I found out that people left and worked in pizzeria or whatever because I guess people were sick. I don't think even it was about money. It was just about living in this specific society that can be so mentally challenging for people. Only one teacher stayed. I, of course, was good friends with him. But what was very interesting that the topic of nationalism, and this is what we also dealt with, it wasn't discussed at all during 6 months of my stay. So the nationalism was like such a taboo topic inside of this high school because people wanted to keep good relationship between each other, of course. We understand this. So any kind of mention of nationalism could raise tensions, could create problems, and could lead to conflict in the eyes of the adults, most of all. So the topic for me, when I was arriving to this high school, I was expecting something, so to say, revolutionary, but what I found out was a completely different reality. The striking reality of this high school, actually, during my stay, is that 80% of the kids who finish this high school, and you have to take into account this is a technical high school, it's not an elite high school, so 80% of the kids does what? After finishing high school, moves to the EU. They don't go to library. They go to EU, they find work, and they find their future. 80% of the kids from this high school. And we are not talking about Sarajevo, because Sarajevo is a still capital city, so you can find some work and so on. We're talking about rural area of Bosnia. So of course they have parents in Sweden, in Slovenia, I don't know, in Germany, not in Hungary. Nobody went to Hungary, unfortunately. I would have easy connection, but nobody went to Hungary, unfortunately. So, before I arrived here, another thing that happened near the town where I live is this. I want to say, as a social anthropologist, I don't have big answer. I don't have any kind of huge answer for the question that I asked at the beginning, because we look at different people, at different social groups, we can always arrive to different conclusions, right? So in the town of Široki Brijeg, which is like 15 minutes from Mostar, we had a concert of Marko Perković Thompson. People from the Balkans know him too well. People outside of Balkans probably not. But he's the most famous Croatian singer today. And people, if they respect him, I mean, a bunch of people around me respect him. I'm Croat, I come from Mostar, obviously, like, I know people, I mean, I live in this area, so right, people like him. He's very popular. In the city of Zagreb, he can gather 500,000 of people in his concert. So the guy is popular, right? The problem is that, unfortunately, he does promote fascist ideology. You cannot say to people that he promotes fascist ideology because they get offended. I don't know why people get offended. People will wear these signs of independent state of Croatia, and you see many of the people who go to this concert are youth. And again, we are talking about nationalism, about historical narratives, about the reality inside of which people have to live. So this is something that I'm just going to say we have to take into account. I mean, obviously, it exists within this complex space that I was trying to describe here. In the town of Mostar, where I come from, after 30 years of this kind of history teaching, we have normalization of division. So the youth, for them, is completely normalized, these historical narratives. They don't question them. People make, who are Croat, fun about mosque being in the city, about ezan, calling for people for prayer, because we live together in the same town, but we live completely separate lives, unfortunately. Jajce is a different story. There people are still integrating, but we have systematic forgetting. I don't know about Sarajevo. It's too early to arrive to any conclusion. But I just want to finish with the role of international community, and this may be related to this school where I studied in 2006, which is International Peace Project. It's called United World College in Mostar, and in this high school we have Hungarians, we have people from the United States, we have people from the UK. Why? Because it's very prestigious international high school. Everybody wants to get IB diploma, and of course if you have kids and you want them to get IB diploma, well, if you go to Mostar it's going to be cheaper, right? So in 2016 I was student in this prestigious high school in this international peace project, and in 2025 I came back as a teacher. What I discovered here, it's a huge change, because if in 2006 70%, don't worry about the literature, I'm not going into this, 70% of us studying in these schools were locals. It meant that international project really cared about creating a unified country, and it put a lot of money into it. It was the only high school where we had Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks studying together. We even studied the same history. It was international history. We didn't deal too much, but we did study Yugoslavia. And my teacher was, of course, history teacher from Finland, because Finland knows, right? So in 2025, we have only 20 to 25% of the locals. If you want to produce a change, obviously you cannot do it with such a small amount of people. But of course, we are talking about completely different international context. I'm sorry for not providing any answers, but this is the story that I could come up with.